The Left-bank Polissya is the northernmost point of Ukraine, the region where asphalt roads and forest and marsh paths begin, leading 1,000 years into the past, when many impassable thickets of broad-leaved and pine forests were inhabited with many different animals, and the Desna River and its tributaries were teeming with fish. With the appearance of mankind, this past today barely resembles the present. For the past 20 years, these lands have been guarded by the Desnyansk-Starohutsk National Park, which is trying to restore the former greatness of this region. Here, there are strict boundaries on which people can have limited farms, and where even that is forbidden, in the natural preserve part of the park. This marking outlines the boundary of the protected zone. In the protected zone, any use of natural resources is prohibited: gathering mushrooms, berries, plants, tree felling, walking and driving. Here, the rare visitors of the protected area can only admire the first flowers. The wonderful pasque flower and the delicate purple bellflower are protected by the Red Book of Ukraine. The only way you can take one home with you as a memento is in the form of a photograph. Traces of human presence from the Neolithic times have been found in the Serednya Buda region. Back then, people had much less impact on the environment, as they limited themselves to hunting and gathering mushrooms, berries and medicinal herbs. People were drawn to these fertile places approximately in the 15th century. Then the first settlements surrounded by dense impassable forests appeared. Their names, Tributska, Stehailivka and Bilousivka, resemble those of the forest lands. As technical progress continued, the forest was given a new purpose. The indigenous population began using valuable species of the wood as building material. Many sources testify to the greatness of these places. One of them is the results of the expedition of the officers of Russian Tsar Peter the Great, who set off along the rivers in search of trees for shipbuilding. In 1761, there was a registered fact that usable pine and oak trees were found near the villages of Starohuta and Holubivka. This is a living testimony and among the specimens in question. It is over 400 years old. It's alive and it bears fruit and it gives acorns that grow into tiny oaks. It is very valuable, which is precisely why we're making our best efforts to preserve it. At the turn of the 17th to 18th centuries, wood was used as a fuel in the distilling, tar and glass industries. Those gave the names to the local villages. For example, glassworks were located in Starohuta and Novahuta, called Hutas. It was a period of merciless destruction of forests. By the end of the 19th century, a little more than half of the huge plantations covering the entire Chernihiv province remained, and it was only the competent and careful management by the new owner of those lands that made it possible to preserve the remaining forests. In the late 18th century, these forests were given to Vasil Kochubey. In that period, forest management was considered to be conducted at a fairly high level. Kochubey then employed bookkeepers who were assigned to conduct a major inventory of the forests. We have preserved to this day the documents from the 1896 forest inventory. Those were specially devised plans for forest management for a certain period. Even if they felled trees, those were small areas of ripe, overly mature plantations, and they planted new forests to replace them. For more convenient management and protection of the forests from fires, way back in the 18th century they were separated into quarters. Broad furrows that stretched over many kilometers, sometimes through swamps, were created not by mechanical means, but by the hands of serfs.
Вот здесь просеки, они очень интересны. В каком отношении? Они все...
In what respect are they interesting? They all have furrows. You can rarely find that in Ukraine, since those forests belonged to Kochubey and he had over 400 serfs at the time of the abolition of serfdom. They did not just divide forests with clearings, they also dug furrows.
Вот эти крепостные люди трудились в том числе не просто на разбивке просек, а...
They're all surrounded with furrows, even though they go through practically impassable swamps. It's hard to get lost in the forest even without the quarter pillars. After walking 750 meters, you will always find another clearing, which eventually leads to the outskirts of the forest. Among the orderly rows of healthy and strong pines, you will most likely find trees with marks that resemble decorative incisions. That is how coniferous woods were harvested for sap during the Soviet era. This precious natural sap was at the time used in the chemical industry and was considered to be a very valuable natural raw material. If we make a cut with a sharp object, there will be droplets of sap. These droplets produced by the tree trunk are called zhivitsia. In order to mechanize the collection of sap, special devices were invented with which the workers could make such incisions.
Приспособления, которыми рабочие подходят, и этот инструмент называется хаком, наносят такие носители.
Those incisions leaked the sap that flowed into the sap receptacle. Then the harvesting brigade collected the sap into buckets.
Бригада сборщика уже собирают эту живицу, как наполнится эта леечка живицей, идут с ведрами и собирают ее.
The vernacular for sap is zhivitsia for a reason. It heals damaged trees, acting as natural protection. When a branch snaps, the tree is damaged mechanically. In order to heal the wound, it oozes the sap.
When
a tree is cut, it focuses all its strength on eliminating the cut. Because of that, they splashed it with sulfuric acid with felling. The healing process was much slower and the tree suffered from much more damage. The purpose of that was to get more sap over longer periods of time, and accordingly, the yields of sap increased.
Брызгала в рану серной кислотой. Вот. И тогда заживление шло гораздо дольше, и дереву приносился еще гораздо больший урон.
While industrial extraction of resin was suspended in the early 1990s, the national park is still suffering from the detrimental effects from it. The sanitary condition of harvested trees is deteriorating year by year. They become vulnerable when they're affected by diseases and various pests. The harvested pines are vulnerable to strong winds. They become brittle, they easily break, and then they die. The consequences of windbreaks and windfalls have not been eliminated in the protected forests of the Desnyansk-Starohutsk Park. In short, fallen trees are left to the destiny of natural processes. We're now in a protected area, and behind my back are the plantations that were damaged by a strong wind, 3 years or a so-called windbreak. 3 years have passed, and despite the speculation that fallen trees would become breeding pockets for diseases and pests, we're not observing anything similar to that. Such decaying logs are also an important part of the forest, a haven for many microorganisms, fungi, and insects. Therefore, such natural oases only support and observe without interfering the process. These are natural formations and they're treated with special care. Not much of a wild natural forest has been preserved here. Forest plantations in the Starohut Massif are mostly man-made. Such plantations are less resilient than the natural ones. These are pure plantations of the same age, so they're prone to attacks by pests. Bark beetles are quickly spreading across Ukraine, including throughout our region. Everyone is aware of this pest. It also exists here, but the question remains, why did it end up in this forest? One of the causes of the damage of the forest by pests is the inadequate resilience of trees. The bark beetle primarily affects artificially planted forests in which trees of the same age grow. The immunity of such plantations is much weaker than that of mixed woods. Pest outbreaks in mixed plantations progress with much less damage. We hope that the plantation behind me will lead to the growth of mixed natural plantations with trees of different ages, which will be more resistant to pests and diseases.
Именно природное насаждение, разновозрастное, смешанное по составу, которое будет более устойчиво против всех болезней и вредителей.
It will take years and even decades before wild forests reappear in these parts. And even though this process is not fast, we have taken the first steps and are allowing nature to set the rule.
We're
now walking through the pine plantation created by humankind many years ago. It is located in a protected zone where natural processes have already begun. The evidence to that is this young oak tree that nobody planted. A jay dropped an acorn here, which grew into a tree. It is highly likely that it will become a mother bat and that not only pure pine plantations will form here, but a mixed oak and a pine forest.
Выйдет оно когда-то в материнский полог, и здесь сформируется не чисто сосновое насаждение, а смешанное дубово-сосновый лес. Также вот есть рядышком.
There's also a birch tree nearby that was also not planted by people. It's the nature's effort. So nature decides on its own what is going to grow here and how the forest will flourish in the future.
Здесь расти и какой здесь должен быть лес.
The human mission is to protect these natural lands by changing the consumerist approach to what nature gives us. The security service of the Desnyansk-Starohutsk Park is responsible for this difficult task. The territory of thousands of hectares, both on land and water, is successfully controlled by only 26 people. Although fighting against modern poachers, armed with suppressed rifles and thermal imagers, and taking into account all the legal norms, is not an easy task. According to legislation, an investigation group is summoned to the site. Everything is documented, and a single registry of pre-trial investigations is currently being introduced. Nothing depends on us during the investigation. However, we react to every violation. We detain the offenders, we expropriate forbidden hunting equipment, and we hand them over to the law enforcement agencies. Much has changed over 20 years of the park's existence. Now, when inspectors go on a raid, they rarely find fish nets or detain fishers with electric fishing rods. Armed hunters also don't risk entering the natural reserve. This is the result of many years of work of our department. We could have discovered several dozen items of forbidden hunting equipment earlier in this period of time. But there are people who care and their numbers are increasing, which is great. People are finally starting to understand that the protection of nature is an important factor. They realize the necessity of the so-called silence regime. After all, back in the old days, church bells didn't chime during bream spawning. And now the national park is creating conditions so that nesting birds won't be scared away and animals with offspring won't be bothered. The employees of the park can already see the fruits of their efforts in the protection of nature. There were no lynxes in these woods for a long time, but a photo trap recorded the appearance of one lynx, photos of elks that were crossing a clearing, as well as a bear. This is the photo trap model that our organization uses. In this case, it has been installed in a grouse nesting spot to determine their number and location. You can find the rare bird in the Red Book of Extinction right along this path here. The lens of the photo trap did not miss it either. Seeing a wild animal, even in the Desnyansk-Starohutsk Park, where they are threatened by almost nothing, is a rare case. Even its employees most often detect animals by their tracks or with the help of photo traps. That is the purpose of creation of an environmental protection area in order to observe the wild nature and explore its unknown paths without interfering in its life processes. Thanks to this, each of us has the opportunity to discover them for ourselves when exploring the vast expanses of the wilderness of Ukraine.